Playbook for Performance, the official podcast of Shauna Corden, the Joan of Arc for corporate healing and performance. Join the quest to make work fun again by preparing leadership for engaging workplaces. And now, your host.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back. So this month, we're kind of talking about how the DISC personality assessment can help you as a leader. It can help identify your own style and the members of your team and how you need to adapt your leadership style in order to best manage them. And this week, we're going to talk about how team culture forms. So it's not exactly everything that you thought it might be. So let's get started. So obviously the leader's style has a big impact on what happens with the team. The team automatically, in most cases, adapts their style to please the leader because, hey, the leader is in control of both their pay and their rewards. And so naturally, adapting their style to please their leader makes good sense. Now, you may have some rebels on your team that are kind of like, yeah, you told me to do it this way, but because you told me to do it that way, I don't want to do it that way anymore. I want to do it my way. And that's okay. Those people still can be really valuable members of the team. Now, a lot of times I will come in when the leader has changed because the team has been operating in a certain way. They know what to expect. Things are going well for them. But then they don't know how this new leader will react. And so we'll do a change management exercise. We will compare like what we know what is to what is now. What was to what is now. And for the things that we don't know about the leader in terms of preferences, style, etc., we build a list of questions to ask them. And that I preview with the new leader and I say, hey, these are some of the questions that your team has. They are certainly used to their old leader operating in a certain way. And so let's enlighten them. Let's tell them how you like to work. And that can be super helpful. It can settle the team down because there's a lot of angst when there's a new leader. And often I think productivity goes down significantly because even though the objectives for everyone and their position plans really haven't changed much, there's a lot of fear, uncertainty, doubt. We call that the FUD factor that happens. And there's a lot of speculation when they don't have information. They just try to fill in all the gaps by essentially gossiping until they hear the real deal. So I encourage you, if you are going through a leader change, don't hesitate. Engage a professional like me to go through that change management exercise with your team so you can make sure that they continue to be productive and the organization gets what they really need. So beyond the leader style, there's the team member style. So depending on whether they're more outgoing or whether they're more reserved, whether they're more questioning and skeptical, or whether they're warm and accepting, the distribution of that team will naturally form the culture in terms of, hey, if most of the team is questioning and skeptical, we're not going to run with just intuition on an idea. We're going to look for data. We're probably going to pull too much data. We're probably going to overanalyze before we make decisions. And so naturally the team will gravitate that way unless they are very intentional about overcoming those natural tendencies that they have. So the other factor that really makes a difference is the duration or the tenure of each of the team members. So you've all heard that term, well, we've always done it that way. Whether it's how grandma prepares her casserole or whether it's how the team gets things done, it will often depend on how things have always been done and what they're used to. So sometimes, even though they may be a bit of a minority in the group group or the members that have the longest tenure can often have an overbearing influence on how things get done. And so when a new person comes in who's a bit naive and may not know why things are done, they'll go, well, why do you do it that way? That doesn't make any sense. It can be really healthy. It can shake things up and have people question their assumptions and challenge how things have been done and maybe recreate some new processes and things like that. But it needs to be handled delicately. Not everybody welcomes being told that they've been doing something stupid for the last 5 years or whatever it might be. So careful on that one. The other influence might be the company style. So of course this is your team, but how does the surrounding teams and organization operate? It could be, maybe you're a small insurance office, but you've got Big Brother looming above you that says, here's all the regulations and policies and how things must get done. And you have to defer to some of that. So that may dictate a little bit of the style as well, even if they're not present with the team. And then there's just other influences. So it might be the industry itself. It might be the diversity of the team. It might be the diversity of backgrounds that people are bringing into the team itself. That can be a big influence as well. So what I want to do now is and if you're watching on YouTube, you're going to be able to see this. So I encourage you, if you're just listening to our podcast, be sure and join us out on YouTube because I'm showing a little visual here. So we've been using the analogy of a clock face. And that the different styles are distributed across the different time stamps, I guess I would say. So if you imagine that clock face 9 to 12, that's our real dominant style. 12 to 3 is our influence style. 3 to 6 is our steadiness style. And from 6 to 9 is our conscientious style. And just as a reminder, the sound bites for each of those in that same order. Dominant style, get it done. The influence style, let's get together. The S style, let's all get along. And the C style, let's get it right. So I'm showing a distribution here of a small team of 5 people. They've got one person in the top half of the clock there. So we have one person, although they're slightly inclined, they're not strongly inclined, meaning they're towards the center of the clock, which means that the rest of the team is mostly reserved, right? A little bit more cautious, and not big personalities, not like, hey, let's kick this off, not a ton of enthusiasm, things like that. So in many ways, this person who is the I may feel an unspoken pressure to kind of tone down their style and enthusiasm, be a little bit more low key because the rest of the team is low key. So, however, they've got some allies in that they have 2 partners or team members who are also warm and accepting. Remember, that's the right hand of the clock there. So warm and accepting. So that means that in general, people aren't super skeptical. They tend to take things at face value. Doesn't mean that they don't value data and things like that, but in general, they're going to accept what you offer at face value. And in general, they want to get along. Now, if you remember from our previous podcast, one of the analogies we used is that the idea about being really intentional, depending how far apart you are. So in terms of the placement of these dots, the I and the 2 S's here, they're really close together. They probably have no problems trying to get along with one another. They can see each other eye to eye. Sometimes the I person might be a little too enthusiastic for them, but not much. They're all pretty moderately or slightly inclined to their style. So not a lot of requirement to be intentional, probably pretty natural. Now, the other 2 members of the team are in the conscientious style. Now, this places them in both the kind of reserved, but also questioning and skeptical. And remember that the soundbite for this group is get it right. So they love data, they love analysis, they probably overanalyze in a lot of cases. But one of the members is just slightly inclined that way, meaning it's very easy they share more of the other personality traits being that way, being so close to the center. However, one of the members is absolutely out on the edge, couldn't get out any further. We call that strongly inclined. That member of the team probably has to be far more intentional with the 3 people that are on the right side of the clock face, and especially the I. So remember, those are opposite personality types in that it's outgoing, warm and accepting versus reserved, questioning and skeptical. So a big stretch to get that rubber band around those 2 dots there. So in general, I would say that this team is probably super harmonious. They all are pretty deferential to one another's needs. They naturally adapt because they're not so strongly inclined themselves, with the exception of this person out on the edge. They may feel like, gosh, am I the only person who thinks this way? I have a theory myself that the further out you are, the more that you know yourself and you're accepting of the way that you are, and you don't feel a need to change who you are in order to please other people. That's just my theory on that, based on the thousands of these assessments that I've done. But I would say that this person probably has to try a little harder, and at times they might feel like they don't quite fit in. But if this person has been with the organization for a very long time, if they have a lot of authority in the industry, or if they're the leader, they probably are okay with that. So that's just a little example of, what this could look like for your team. If you are interested in having your team take the assessment and then also do a culture map, and there's a lot more detail in the culture report itself. But one of the things that I really like to do with team members is just to have them broadcast, this is how you best work with me. And depending on the history of the person and the exceptions that they have in their report, it may not be difficult, or it may be very difficult. So it really can be very enlightening and overcome some of these challenges. I hope this has been helpful. These workshops can be delivered in a lunch and learn, a half-day workshop, or a full 2-day workshop, depending on how much depth you want to get into. But I highly recommend it when it comes to transitions with teams, mergers, acquisitions, new leaders, things like that. It can be really, really helpful to up the productivity in the team and get them back together. So one of the things that I really want to go into today in terms of the benefits of doing this is that you can be very intentional in curating your team's style. Now, I'm not saying that they need to conform. That's a totally different concept, and I wouldn't recommend that. We really want to go with what's natural. Allow people to be who they are naturally, their own preferences and tendencies, and honor those. But when it comes to working together, to make concessions and to try to make one another happy and make it a more pleasant experience. So think about what's natural for the team. There's probably a lot of adaptations that the team members have made already because of being in the industry, or again, deferring to that leader that controls their pay and rewards. One of the questions the team can ask themselves is, what do they want more of? What works really well with the team? What has a natural flow? What keeps everybody happy? Is it space? Is it working together? What are those things? And then what habits personally, or what standard operating procedures can you implement that will help facilitate that? Could be autonomy of schedule, could be making sure everybody's well informed, All those things can be super helpful. The other question to ask is, what do you want less of? Where does your team have a lot of friction? Where could they use more help? Where does productivity halt? What is it that they need in order to be productive in those areas? And of those things that you want less of, how can you make them less convenient? It's sort of like putting the cookies on the top shelf that you have to have a ladder to get to. How can you make those less convenient and lean into more of what it is that you really want? So we'd love to hear your feedback on this. If you have questions about your team, something you've observed, something you really want to get an expert's opinion on, we'd love to hear from you. So please drop a note into our podcast at shawnacorden.com. Or if you're in YouTube, you can drop a note on the comments and we would be happy to help. So until next time, take good care.
Thank you for listening to Playbook for Performance. To learn more about Shauna Corden, her consulting programs and tools, please visit her website at shawnacorden.com and follow us on social media at Shauna Corden.